All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, which makes it Backdrop Day. Happy Backdrop Day, everyone.
Yay.
Um, Today is October. It's a new month. It's very exciting. We're here to do a little status update on Backdrop CMS. Backdrop CMS is a content management system specifically geared towards nonprofits and small to medium-sized businesses and anyone who has concerns about building a really comprehensive website on a smallish budget. What we're trying to do is create a system that has features that are comparable to that of Drupal 8, but on an architecture that is more comparable to that of Drupal 7. In fact, we think Drupal 7 is already too hard and too slow and too complicated, and so we're going to try and make it even easier, faster, and less complicated in the future. So what we're going to be doing is adding new features and simplifying existing systems whenever we can do so without requiring too much API change from Drupal 7. So Backdrop CMS is going to be very similar to Drupal 7, but it's still going to include all of the things that are most important in terms of making sure you get new features and tools that you need to do the job. Our timeline for Backdrop, we are hoping to release Backdrop 1.0.0 this fall, which gives us a few months at the most in order to get everything done. But once we get the 1.0.0 release out, we will continue with more releases in short iterations. So every quarter we'll come out with a new release that'll contain new features. And again, we won't be breaking APIs in those. So hopefully we'll be able to get initial release out and then add a bunch of new stuff iteratively going forward. So even though 1.0 is out, that's not going to be the end of what's in 1.0. We will continue to improve as time goes on. In terms of what we're working on now, we have a couple of things which are release blockers that we need to get done before we can release. And then we have a couple of things that are important, but maybe won't prevent the original release. So we're going to start with this list of release blockers. And some of them are huge things, like the first one here, our blocks and layouts solution. Drupal 7 for a long time has, or Drupal all versions, has had a really hard time of figuring out how to handle its layout. The Drupal 8 had an initiative for creating blocks and layouts that was never realized. What we want to do is solve that problem once and for all in Backdrop. And Nate, do you want to give us an update on where we're in the blocks and layouts?
Yeah. Things are continuing to roll along in just a really excellent way with blocks and layouts. We've had the base system kind of functioning correctly. It's not part of the project yet. It still lives independently, its own separate little branch over in issue 86. If you want to take a look at it. But 2 weeks ago, I recorded a new video of blocks and layouts in action, and you can see it fully replacing the theme system and the traditional region system, and really reducing the role of the block module down to nothing but custom blocks. And now layout module kind of takes over everything. The only critical task we have left in blocks and layouts land is filling out all of the automated tests. I've been writing tests for the past week, and things look really pretty good. We're pretty much at the same level of testing as we had previously with blocks, but layouts can do a whole lot more than blocks could, so we still are filling out kind of more comprehensive automated testing to make sure that things stay working. Also exciting, I did benchmarks for the first time this past week, and initially layouts were quite a bit slower than the old block system, but I hadn't done any optimization at all. I went back through and introduced a new cache table, and then made it so that layouts were utilizing caching properly. And now we're seeing like pretty significant performance improvements on the front end, like somewhere upwards around like 15% or something like that for the front end. Yeah, it's great. It seems like the more blocks you have on the page, the better the performance improvement is, which is just tremendous. And I think most of that comes down to there's like 90 fewer calls to Drupal render on the page, and that's probably because like we got rid of the page renderable, and the blocks themselves like just are rendered into text a lot sooner. So the overall amount of rendering that has to do all at once seems to be dramatically reduced.
Yay.
So yeah, it's really exciting. And we haven't even added back-end block caching yet. The block caching right now is removed, just kind of as a byproduct. It needs to be re-implemented. So there's still room for more improvement. But right now, yeah, we're looking just fantastic. Like, the new system is just awesome. Like, the functionality it adds is incredible. You know, contexts, they're responsive layouts. You can have multiple layouts. Just all kinds of greatness. Yeah, I'll stop now. It's looking really amazing. We do need a lot of more people to test out the new software, though. So if anybody out there has an opportunity to do so, please go and see issue 86 in the backdrop GitHub issue queue. Find the branch, copy the branch locally, and then give it a try. We're probably still a couple weeks away from merging, but I've been saying this, like, I think we'll get it, you know, really soon here. I said in the last couple of weeks in the next month, so probably in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll see the initial merge into the project.
That's exciting.
Yeah, really exciting.
So we've solved the blocks and layouts problem, and we've introduced a performance improvement, which is fantastic. So other things that we're working on that are release blockers but are underway is we're working on introducing a system for configuration management. So this solves the problem of you have a website, it's up, it's been up for a while, and you need to add a new feature. That new feature requires some content types and some views and a lot of things that you do in Drupal by clicking things together. So what you want to do is click it together on a local site or on a development site somewhere, and when you have exactly what you want to then deploy that to your live site. And it's really hard to do that in Drupal because the things that you click together aren't meant to be deployed. They live in the database and they stay in the database, and there are some tools like the features module that lets you manage this, but it doesn't work very well just because Drupal wasn't intended to be used that way. And so both Drupal 8 and Backdrop have decided to create a distinction in the way that the information is saved. So if you have configuration, it gets saved into files, and if you have data, it gets saved in the database. And as soon as those things are separate, you can then deploy your configurations from one site to another. We've done the same thing in Backdrop, where we've got a system that saves to configuration files. We can deploy those configuration files from one development environment to another. And we're working on finalizing all of the conversions of all of the systems in core that need to save their configuration. So where we are right now is that we have several of the subsystems converted. We need help with a couple more, most notably fields and content types, because if we don't have content types and fields converted to CMI, we don't really have configuration management. But we have already converted views, which was the other big one, because that was something new that we were adding into core. We were able to just write that integration directly when views went in, which is great. So we still need some help with config management. If anybody else wants to jump in and help work on some of those subsystems, that would be great. I know we do have a bunch more activity in the issue queue lately, so if anyone who's working already feels motivated to work on CMI stuff, we would love that. But we do still need to work on getting that in before we release this. Is that our last huge remaining release blocker is getting these converted. The other thing that we have here is views. I mentioned that views already saves to CMI because it was recently added to core. We have the entire views subsystem in core. What we also have in core, though, are a whole bunch of pages that views could override but doesn't. And so we need people to build us some views. And so that's a less heady task in a lot of cases. Building these views listings are pretty straightforward. You know, some people have started on a few of them. We have to get those wrapped up and to get all of the rest of them converted. And I think for release, what we should shoot for is getting all of the front-end views converted before we release. So getting stuff like the front page and the taxonomy term listing and some of the blocks converted into views. And getting our administrative listings converted to like views plus views bulk operations is not necessarily a release blocker, although it would be really great to get all of those converted as well, so that if you wanted to change the way your content list worked, you would be able to do that more easily just because it's already a view rather than having to replace it with a view. But I think it's nice to have, not necessarily required. And that does also require converting some of the actions to be able to work from a views interface. So there's a easy stuff, which is build some views, and then there's some more complicated stuff, which is build views and build actions that work with those views. And I think for release, all we need to do is get those views built. So anyone who knows how to build views in Drupal 7 will know how to build views in Backdrop, and we could definitely use your help in getting those built and added in. So other things that we're working on that are not necessarily release blockers, but that are super important for us, are getting all of the changes that have been into Drupal 7 also merged into Backdrop. So that includes anything that's been committed and included in 731 or 732 if it's out before we release. Those need to be merged into Backdrop just so that we're not behind the curve on what problems that Drupal has solved. And then we also, which is something that is super important, need to get all of the security releases that are in Drupal 7 also in Backdrop. So problems that have been solved for Drupal need to be solved in Backdrop in the same or similar ways. I know that there's one of them that we're still kind of evaluating is, was this solution the right solution for Backdrop, even though it was the right solution for Drupal. But there are a couple of other ones. I know we've got some traction on those too. I think we've got some pull requests. So it'd be good to get those cleaned up as well. And then we've also got a bunch of backports, things that have been, problems that have been solved in Drupal 8 or solutions that have been introduced that we care a lot about, and we'd like to see those in Backdrop as well. These are just kind of some cleanup tasks, making sure that we get all of our HTML5 elements in so that we have a nice mobile-friendly base for people to start from, and then doing some cleanup on stuff for front-end folks like CSS and JavaScript, and just making sure that things are consistent from place to place. Those, again, are not release blockers, but it would be super nice if we could clean up our act a little bit on the front end. Drupal 8 is going to have Twig, which is going to be a huge draw. We can do a lot of the stuff that was done in the Twig initiative to Backdrop without actually changing to Twig. All of the cleanup in CSS files, JavaScript files, template files, syntax, consolidation of things can all be done in Backdrop as well. We just need to make sure that we focus on getting the most important things done first. So we've got a couple of backport issues from Drupal 8 stuff that would be pretty good for new people to come in if you want to just help us clean up some JavaScript files. They're little, they don't take very much time, and you can knock them out, one at a time as you have the urge. And we've got some other stuff we're working on too, which is less critical, but still we think really important for Backdrop. The biggest one on here is separating our identity from Drupal's identity. We did fork this from the Drupal project, which means that initially it started off as exactly the same thing. We've made a bunch of changes, and we need to make sure that our identity reflects the fact that we are a different software platform now. And we've made a bunch of changes to the installer so that when you're installing Backdrop, it doesn't say installing Drupal and show a Drupal icon. It actually looks and feels like Backdrop. But we'd like to take that one step further and make the entire administration experience feel different as well. Drupal introduced a really great administrative theme in Drupal 7 called 7. We're going to be doing some improvements to that theme to make it more Backdrop-y. I think we should probably also change the name, because having a name called 7 doesn't make any sense in a software platform that doesn't even have a version 7 in its history. But before we do that, we want to make sure we know where we're going in terms of what it should look like, what it should feel like. And we do have Julia working on a style guide for us so that we'll have some guides as to what colors we should use and what fonts and where they should go and how things should look. As soon as she's done with the style guide, then we'll start writing some patches against our administration theme and make sure that it starts to feel a little bit different than Drupal as well. Other things we're working on, obviously I talked about how there's a lot we can do in our front end and our theme system to clean up. So that's an issue here. Again, not a release blocker, but we can do some consolidation of things. We can do some making things make more sense. We can do some stuff that will give us some performance improvements. So we've got a meta list here of stuff that is nice to have, but won't prevent the release of the software. And then same thing goes for user experience improvements too. We want to make the experience for people who are creating content on the site better. We've already made a couple of significant improvements. We've cleaned up the modules page. We've added a drop-down menu for our administration bar. And I think that we've already gotten leaps and bounds over Drupal 7, but there's a bunch of stuff that's going on in Drupal 8 that is also really good that we should take a look at and include the things we want. One of those in particular is adding a rich text editor to core. And that's something that is really important to us, but doesn't need to go into the 1.0.0 release because we can add it later without breaking any APIs. But if we had someone who was willing to work on that now, it would be fantastic if we could release 1.0.0 with the rich text editor. So if that's something that you're particularly passionate about, pop up in IRC and talk to us about it. We have a bunch of ideas. Look at the GitHub issue queue. There's an issue there for it already. And yeah, so we could definitely use some help there, or any of the other user experience tasks. Most of them are fairly easy in terms of technical implementation, though difficult in terms of decisions that need to be made as to what would actually make things better. So feel free to weigh in those conversations too, even if you aren't interested in writing the code. And then we have a new section of tasks here where I'm just kind of throwing in stuff that needs a final review before release. And it looks like so far we've got all of our CSS cleanup as a task in there. We also are pretty soon going to be able to include the blocks and layouts review, which would be great. And some of these other things like HTML5 are, 2 issues away from being done. So we'll get all those into this final review section, and we could definitely use some people, new eyes on the code or new eyes on the face, help us with the final review before release there. So that would be great. The Project Management Committee has no updates for the larger audience this week, but if any issues get escalated through our issue queue and need to be discussed, the answers will be discussed in this part of the meeting in the future. So nothing to report today, but we will reserve this spot for reports in the future. There are a bunch of other things that we were working on too that don't include the Backdrop CMS project code itself, and those include all of the peripherals that we need for supporting the community around Backdrop CMS. One of the things that we've been working on a lot lately is the API website. We've got it pulling from our code. We've got change records created up there. We're going to need some help from people just writing up documentation on these change records, porting over change records that exist for Drupal 8, making sure that they're accurate for what we're doing in Backdrop as opposed to what's going on in Drupal 8, and then adding a bunch of new ones for things that we've changed that Drupal 8 hasn't. So we're going to need some help there. Someone with some technical understanding of what's going on would be beneficial, but also someone with some writing skills. Even if you don't understand the technical details, having someone draft things up initially would be great. For someone who does have technical skills to review would be beneficial. So we could definitely use help there from anyone who feels so inclined. We also have a need for an update server. So this is when your Backdrop website goes to check to see if it's up to date. Right now the code pings Drupal, I think, which is not going to work long term. We're going to need to build our own update server so that Backdrop can ping Backdrop's update server and find out if it's up. And we have some ideas about things that we would like to track. Something, for example, it was really hard to remove things from core in Drupal because we didn't have any statistics on which core modules were actually being used. So it would be good when we build Backdrop server to include that, so we get some statistics on, are people actually using our new admin bar module or not? And that way it'll help us gauge going forward how valuable the things that we've done are and what holes need to be met. So I think that would be really great. If you want to work on an update server, give us a ping there and we can talk about what's needed and how to get that going. Other thing we need is a GitHub service. So since all of our contrib code is going to be hosted on GitHub, we're going to need a nice, easy way for people to search and find things. And we want to do that from the backdropcms.org primary website. In order to do that, it's going to need a way to find Backdrop-specific projects on GitHub, and you do that by providing a service on GitHub that allow people to register modules and themes and layouts as specifically for Backdrop. And so we have some ideas about how to do that as well. And I know that we've had a couple of people who are interested in working on it. If you're still interested in working on it, give us a ping. We can figure out how to help get that going forward too. And then obviously the backdropcms.org primary website, it's going to get a design rebrand before we release, hopefully before we release, maybe shortly after, depending on how busy we are. And we'd also like to add a couple of new sections. Obviously, we're going to need to build the pages that allow people to search for modules and themes. We want to add a showcase section. We talked about adding, a job section. All of the stuff that the Drupal community has as part of its stuff we want to try and recreate for Backdrop. But of course, we'll try and gauge the priorities there. If there aren't any Backdrop jobs yet, it's silly to add a Backdrop job site. But long term, we do have plans for how to do some of these things. So if you're interested in working on that, either the retheme, we're getting designs done already, that would be great, or adding some of these new features, we could use help with that as well. So in terms of when all of this work is getting done, we do sprint every Thursday afternoon after this meeting. So if you want to meet us in IRC, there's things we can help you with. Ping us by name if you're trying to get us our attention, because sometimes we've got our noses in the code and don't notice just general chatter in there. Yeah, we can help give you things to do or help you with things you're working on, answer questions about the project, anything like that. And then we do have one in real life sprint coming up at Bad Camp. We're going to do it on Sunday, November 9th in the Coder Lounge area. So if you'd like to meet us in person, ask us some hard questions face-to-face, we're definitely up for that. And we'll be trying to get some work done on getting the project out the door probably by that point. So that would be really fun. In terms of what's coming up, Nate and I will be attending the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit to talk to that crowd about what Backdrop is, why it exists, and hopefully have a little demo that'll go over amazingly, we're hoping, which will be fun. And then the following week, we're going to be speaking at the HTML5 Developer Conference, which is here in San Francisco. It'll be our first chance to demo the software to a group of people who don't necessarily know what Drupal is, which I think is going to be great. We're going to be kind of sticking our toe in the larger world of HTML people and showing them what we have. And then we've got Bad Camp, which is November 6th through 9th. Which of course will be there, although I'll be pretty busy. Nate will be probably sprinting. But we'll definitely be around. We'll try and give a talk, all that good stuff. And then we're going to be going to SymphonyCon in Madrid, which is November 27th, which is super exciting to go talk to another open source community that is tightly tied to Drupal for a bunch of other reasons, and talk to them about basically the message being better code isn't necessarily better for the community. And it is a community that also loves better code, just much like the Drupal community. So it'll be interesting to see how our message is received there, if they're getting the same kind of business pressures in the real world that we're getting that sparked the creation of Backdrop. So I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited talking to people at HTML Developer 5 Conference, kind of branching out from our typical group of Drupal people and speaking to the larger world about Backdrop, which I think will be great. And then there's a whole bunch of Drupal events coming up as well. There's a DrupalCon in Latin America in February. There's one in Los Angeles in May. There's one in India shortly thereafter. And I was specifically asked by one of the DrupalCon Latin America organizers to submit a session on Backdrop, so I did, but then it got escalated to the larger group to see how they felt about that, and they decided that it was not appropriate as a session. But then the guy begged me to come and do it as a BOF. He's like, you've got to come, you've got to talk about it. And I'm kind of conflicted about doing that, just because when we first forked, we had some heavy conversations with people about how that would go down. But I think it would be good if we could get there anyway and just chat with people about Backdrop and how it's going and what it means, especially in a part of the world where they seem to be really hungry for it. So that is definitely on our agenda, and we'll try and find a way to make that work too. So we've also been asked to speak at DrupalCon India. I was contacted by one of their organizers, and they requested that we do a featured session on Backdrop, and I'm not sure how that's going to go down either. But we will see. You know, maybe the environment in the Drupal community will have calmed down a little bit by the time the India conference rolls around. I know it's still a little tense there for the Latin America ones, as being the next con after this week, which is Amsterdam. So we'll see. Again, we don't really want to go anywhere we're not wanted, but it seems like we're getting a huge push from the larger community to come and speak about Backdrop, even if they aren't necessarily behind us. They want to hear what we have to say, which is a good first step, I think. So it's pretty exciting in terms of what's coming up. And I would say if there are any other camps or conferences that want to hear about what we're talking about, even if they don't want us to come and talk to their people, but they want to talk to us personally, I'm definitely open to having that conversation. I've had a couple of really great phone conversations with, 4 random business owners on the phone that have a bunch of hard questions for us. That's fine too. We're happy to talk about what we're doing and why. Obviously, we feel very strongly about it. So, yeah, I think it's great. Nate, do you want to add anything to the meeting today?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, I know we've been kind of rambling on for a while. There's a lot of great stuff going on.
Yeah, I guess I owe pull request reviews to a lot of people. There are a number of pull requests that are outstanding, and I'm going to get to them as soon as possible.
Okay. Would it be helpful if I did the initial pull request review thing like we did a couple weeks ago, where I can assign things to you?
Yeah, that would be handy, because some of the things, like we've got a volunteer who's actually started porting views, but I think that it's lacking like an upgrade path and things like that, so it's not ready yet. But just addressing the feedback and trying it out would be helpful, because right now it needs more work, but he needs to be told that it needs more work.
Okay, and hopefully not just needs more work. Right.
Exactly. Sometimes my responses are like, needs an upgrade path, meh, and
too busy to tell you what to do, but you should go do it. Okay. I'll see if I can do some of those today. I think that might be a really good use of my time. I don't have a lot of time today, so I think if I can do pull request reviews and rather than writing code, that would be useful for you and also easy for me to manage. So,
okay.
Perfect.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, we will see everyone on the internet, and same bad time, same bad channel next Thursday.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching.
Happy Backdrop Day.
Bye, guys.